Discover the unexpected power within the bullied. The room was suffused with the cold glare of fluorescent lights, harsh and unyielding, casting sharp-edged shadows across the glass-walled conference hall. Outside, the relentless New York rain smeared the cityscape into streaks of indistinct color, mirroring the blurry swelling of shame rising inside Lenora's chest. She stood at the front, clutching a sleek tablet, the polished plastic both familiar and foreign beneath her fingertips. The murmurs and tense coughs rippled through the audience like a tidal wave of disapproval. Harold's voice cut through the murmurs, slick with condescension and a poison masked as casual disdain. "Let's be honest, Lenora. This is hardly what I'd call groundbreaking tech insight. Are you sure you're not out of your depth?" His words weren't meant just to challenge but to undermine, carrying the weight of unspoken barriers and assumptions. A wave of laughter followed, muffled yet cruel, cascading over her like a sudden downpour. Lenora's face flushed. Her heart thundered fiercely, painfully aware of every pair of eyes seemingly judging the very air she breathed. The ID badge pinned to her blousey, a symbol of identity and place within this corporate maze, felt suddenly like a label stamped for dismissal. She opened her mouth, searching for words to reclaim the room, but the silence stretched too long. The clicking of Harold's pen against the lectern punctuated the space where her defense should have been. The faint scent of spilled coffee from rushed cups and the sterile tang of electronics mingled in the air, framing the moment with a sense of sterile finality. Her gaze flickered to the rain-streaked windows. Droplets racing each other down the glass, blurred and fast, an aching metaphor for her own flight from the spotlight. Behind her, faces filled with polite sympathy quickly dissolved into the cold anonymity of corporate faces turned away. Harold advanced, looming taller than his stature hinted as he dismissed her with a wave. "Maybe stick to secretarial work, Lenora. Leave the tech to those who actually know what they're doing." His words landed like a slap in the face that echoed in her ears long after the conference ended. Lenora swallowed hard, a tight knot forming in her throat. The room began to disperse, footsteps echoing hollowly against the marbled floor as colleagues cast sidelong glances, a mix of pity, discomfort, and relief that it was not them in the firing line. She stood still for a moment, her back stiff, the vibrant fabric of her blouse a bold contrast against the coldness enveloping her. The subtle hum of computers and muted conversations floated back up from the vast office spaces beyond this room, but she felt impossibly alone. A breath caught, held. The cold concrete beneath the vast windows seemed to stretch endlessly, mirroring the vast gulf between her aspirations and the harsh reality she'd just faced. Outside, the rain intensified, pounding against the glass in angry rhythms, drowning out the distant sirens and the low murmur of a city that never truly paused. Lenora's fingers unconsciously traced the edges of her badge, affair shaped sharp, unmoving, a reminder that identity was both armor and target. As the last echoes of the meeting faded, Lenora lowered her gaze, resolve shimmering faintly beneath the surface of the sting and silence. Outside, the corridor's shadows mingled with the pulse of rain, a bleak world pressing inward, yet beneath her momentary weakness, a quiet ember of resilience smoldered, waiting for breath, for fire. And at that breathless pause, the story of rejection lingered like the rain, raw, unresolved, yet poised on the brink of something fierce and wholly new. Lenora collapsed into the cracked leather of the office chair, the low hum of the city night through the glass pane offering no comfort. The fluorescent lights were long off, but the faint glow from the street lamps outside cast muted shadows around her, framing the outlines of a tired, isolated figure. Everywhere inside and out, the city thrummed with life, but inside her, the pulse quieted, slowed under the weight of humiliation that Harold's biting words had carved into her skin. Her fingers trembled as they brushed over the colorful blouse that had once felt like a shield, now just a vivid mockery against her sinking despair. The pencil skirt felt tight, constricting, a reminder not just of the corporate uniform but of the invisible chains of expectation and judgment she bore daily. In this unforgiving glass tower, where ambition was currency, she felt bankrupt. Lenora's mind relived the room, the sharp snide sneers, the laughter that peeled through the sterile air like acid rain, her own stunned silence strangled by a tide of shame. How quickly respect crumbled when shadows of prejudice seeped in, how swiftly her contributions were reduced to jokes and dismissive glances. She thought of her badge, glittering faintly on the desk, the plastic emblem of belonging that now felt more like a target. The rain lashed against the windowpane, the droplets racing each other down the glass, jagged streaks blurring the city lights. Each drop mirrored the turmoil coursing beneath her calm facade, a storm of doubt and anger battling for dominion. She clenched her fists, nails digging white crescents into her palms, a silent roar muffled by the night. Maybe I'm just fooling myself, she thought bitterly. Maybe this isn't my place. But the echo of the small victories, the late nights mastering coding languages, the moments of problem-solving when she saw things others missed kindled a fragile ember within. Her love for technology wasn't diminished by the sneers of Harold or the whisperings of those who would see her erased. A soft buzz interrupted the silence, her phone, glowing quietly on the desk. She reached for it cautiously, half expecting more poison to drip from the screen, but instead found a message from an unfamiliar number. "You're more than they see. Don't give up." Her breath caught. Who could it be? The words were simple, but their weight shifted the air, a gentle push at the door of her spiraling thoughts. She stared out past the rain-specked window, her reflection fractured by the water, the colors blurred and merging, yet still distinctly hers. The layers of resilience beneath the hurt began to surface, fragile but undeniable. The night deepened, shadows swirling with rain and the distant sounds of a city that never truly sleeps. Lenora sat back, the tight knot in her chest loosening, if only a fraction. The sting of rejection was still raw, but now threaded with the first sharp threads of determination. There was a long path ahead, a tempest of battles yet to come, but beneath the veil of loss, a fierce, quiet flame flickered, refusing to be doused. Her gaze fixed on the vast cityscape, rain streaking the glass like tearsand behind them, a sunrise waiting to break. The story was far from over. The rain spat against the towering glass of the corporate building, each droplet a drumbeat against Lenora's racing heart. The office was empty now, the day's chaos dissolved into a stark silence broken only by the hum of the city's pulse beyond the window. The cold blue-gray light filtered through the rain-splattered glass, casting fractured reflections on the polished surfaces, a myriad of glimmers resembling broken shards of her confidence still scattered across the room. Lenora stood by her desk, head bowed slightly, a weight heavy upon her shoulders that had no visible shape but was as palpable as the storm outside. Her eyes, usually bright and defiant, reflected a quiet turmoil, the aftershocks of Harold's biting public derision still reverberating in her mind. The memory of scornful laughter and dismissive gestures echoed like thunder, threatening to drown the flicker of hope she desperately clung to. Her fingers brushed against the sleek case of her tablet, the device a symbol of the future she longed to claim, a beacon of empowerment tangled with her dreams of belonging. Yet now, it felt cold and distant, a reminder of a battlefield where every move was shadowed by prejudice and power. Drawn by instinct, Lenora's gaze fell toward her corporate ID badge pinned to the edge of her desk. The badge shimmered faintly under the muted office light, its emblem a blend of identity and exclusion. To others, it might have represented rank or status. To her, it was a fragile lifeline to a world that seemed ever poised to reject her. The quiet solitude of the room deepened, wrapping her in a cocoon of reflection, where every doubt, every whispered insult weighed on her like an unyielding tide. The loneliness of her struggle was felt in the ache of the empty chair opposite her, a stark contrast to the bustling camaraderie she had once hoped to find within these walls. But then, a faint rustling broke the stillness. A folded piece of paper slipped beneath the rising edge of her keyboard. The suddenness of it startled her, heart skipping a beat. Lenora's hands, steady now with cautious curiosity, unfolded the note with trembling fingers. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar, but the words cut through the fog of her despair with crystalline clarity. your strength is unseen by many, but recognized by those who dare to look. Do not let the storm silence your light. A fragile warmth unfurled within her chest, like the slow dawning of first light behind thick clouds. The note's simple promise was a lifeline tethered to possibility, a quiet rebellion against the suffocating silence and unseen barriers. She pressed the paper against her heart, the pulse steady and resolute despite the lingering ache. Her eyes lifted once more to the rain-streaked window, the world outside smeared and distorted but alive, ever-shifting, like the path she now knew she must take. The rhythmic tapping of the rain was no longer a dirge but a clarion call summons to rise anew. Lenora's gaze hardened with determination. The flame within flickered back to life, fragile but utterly defiant. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for her tablet, fingers tapping with renewed purpose. The room seemed to warm imperceptibly, the cold blue tones softened by the subtle, fierce glow of hope rekindled. As the rain wove its patterns on the glass, reflecting fractured city lights like stars in a restless sky, Lenora stepped forward, not into resolution, but into a fierce, unyielding new beginning. The story was hers to write, and this was the first true sentence. The morning light was pale, filtered through the gray, rain-streaked windows that rimmed the corner office where Lenora sat at her desk, the cold gleam of computer screens her sole companions. Outside, the relentless drizzle blurred the city, muffling the cacophony of New York into a subdued murmur. The rain traced its slow, wandering patterns down the glass like tears, silver trails reflecting the storm within her. The office was still, yet charged with the fragile buzz of anticipation. Lenora's fingers hesitated, hovering above the keyboard. Her breaths were shallow, the memories of public humiliation at Harold's hands freshly etched into her psyche. Yet beneath the weight of doubt, a subtle fire kindled, a fragile ember of determination poised to break free. She began to type, pulling analytics from the stubborn data that no one else in the office had bothered to understand. The code was intricate, weaving threads of insight from the tangled digital maze, her mind sharpening with every line. She was no longer just the secretary, nor merely the woman dismissed by laughter in a sterile conference room. She was a problem solver, a creator of order from chaos. The hum of printers and the distant clatter of coffee machines framed her efforts. Somewhere across the open plan office, she heard the faint click of Heelson Ally quietly stepping closer, a new rhythm in the subdued symphony of corporate war. Her phone buzzed, a text from a colleague she barely knew. Saw your work on the data. Impressive. Need help? A small smile played on Lenora's lips, the first breach in the armor of isolation. It was a moment, a thread that connected her to the possibility of support, a crack in the towering fortress of indifference. Yet, just as hope warmed her heart, a shadow stretched across the screen when an error popped up, an inexplicable glitch that threatened to undo hours of careful work. Lenora's brow furrowed. The setback cut sharply, a reminder of the tenuous line she walked between progress and failure. Still, she pressed on, every setback a lesson, every small win a claim staked in the terrain of respect. The office lights flickered as the storm outside deepened, thunder rolling low and unrelenting, a precursor to the turbulent fights yet to come. She glanced around, eyes briefly connecting with the cautious nod of the colleague who had reached out, a silent pact forged beneath the harsh glow of fluorescent bulbs. "We'll get through this," Lenora whispered, a vow stronger than the dread rising in her chest. Her gaze returned to the fading error message, fingers poised to rewrite the narrative. But then, from the far end of the office, a cold, deliberate voice pierced the fragile calm. "Careful where you step, Lenora." Harold's tone slid like ice. Not everyone welcomes a disruptor. The room seemed to hold its breath, caught between the flickering lights and the pounding rain, a perfect storm of fear and courage, waiting to either break or ignite. And in that charged silence, Lenora faced the intangible brink, the choice between retreat and rebellion. The echo of rain against the glass morphed into the rhythm of a dawning revolution, and as the clock ticked relentlessly forward, the story waited for her next move. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sporadic shadows that danced across the polished surfaces of the corporate office. Lenora's workspace was bathed in cold blue tones, the hue a stark contrast to the heat rising behind her eyes. She worked with a quiet intensity, fingers flying across the keyboard as she navigated the tangled digital maze. The promise of progress flickered in her mind, fueling her resolve. Yet beneath this fragile forward momentum hovered a darker force. Her recent triumphs, the small victories in systems upgrades and problem resolutions, were met with thinly veiled disdain and veiled sabotage. Files went missing, code snippets corrupted, errors blamed on her fabrications tailored to erode her credibility. Lenora's heart tightened with every false accusation pinned like a scarlet letter on her sleeve. Her allies, few but steadfast, whispered cautions in hushed tones. Marcus, the IT specialist with sharp eyes and a gentle demeanor, stood by her side, offering a wary smile. "You're making waves, Lenora," he warned one late afternoon, the hum of servers pulsating around them like a heartbeat. But in this tank, predators circle when prey looks vulnerable. The weight of his words settled over her like an ominous cloud. Outside, the rain had turned relentless, drumming a relentless rhythm on the rooftop, cold droplets cascading over the broad windows, obscuring the bustling city, a mirror to the storm she now found herself battling both within and without. Harold's presence was a looming shadow. His dismissive glances followed her through meetings. The slight curl of a sneer whenever she presented a solution echoed louder than any praise ever could. Rumors frothed in the dark corners of the office, fingers pointed, tongues wagged. "She's lucky to have that ID badge," one whispered, the dismissal ringing like a verdict. Lenora's breaths came in shallow bursts, the tension coiling tighter with each passing day. Yet she pressed forward, driven by an unyielding spark beneath the weight of adversity. The errors were challenges to overcome, the silence between colleagues an invisible opponent to break. Late nights blurred into one another, the glow of screens her only companions. Her reflection in the dark monitor was a ghostly apparition, eyes fierce, jaw clenched, determination set in stone amidst the hazy shadows. One evening, a new crisis erupted. The company's vital server, a digital vault of sensitive data, crashed without explanation, jeopardizing a multi-million-dollar deal scheduled for the following day. Panic rippled through the ranks like wildfire. Lenora stayed late, relentless in her pursuit of the fault in the system. As the rain turned to a steady downpour outside, the office emptied one by one, leaving her isolated with the flicker of emergency lights and the quiet tremble of impending disaster. Her screen blinked alive with lines of code, a puzzle that held the fate of her career and the company in its cryptic script. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy yet strangely liberating. Suddenly, a discovery sent a jolt of electricity through her veins, a backdoor into the server's defenses, a vulnerability hidden beneath layers of complex firewalls. It was a security breach, deliberate and dangerous, a crack in the armor exposing the rot within. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard, a surge of fear and resolve mingling. This revelation was a double-edged sword, a key that could unlock truth or a blade that could sever her last ties to safety. From the gloom emerged Harold's cold, cutting voice on the phone, accusing, venomous. "What have you done? This breach will cost us everything." The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Lenora's heart thundered, the storm outside mirroring the tempest within. The moment teetered on a knife's edge between ruin and redemption, between silence and confrontation. And at that precipice, Lenora made a choice not just for herself, but for every quiet voice dismissed and every fire waiting to be ignited. The screen glowed with the secrets she uncovered, a silent testament to the battle that had only just begun. The vibrant hum of the city outside the corporate high-rise had faded into a subdued, almost ominous silence, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the towering glass windows. Inside the stark office, illuminated by the cold blue glow of flickering monitors, Lenora sat rigid at her desk, the weight of the day settling heavily upon her shoulders. Her reflection in the window was fractured, the blurred neon lights merged with the contours of her determined face, the curly crown of her hair a vivid flame against the night. Hours earlier, within these walls dense with whispers and covert glances, she had uncovered a breach, a sinister fracture in the company's digital defenses more profound than a mere technical glitch. It was a deliberate, orchestrated sabotage, a shadow war waged by invisible adversaries whose faces remained hidden behind the false smiles of her colleagues. The irony was bitter. While she sought to uplift and innovate, others conspired to discredit and destroy. The once encouraging message from a sympathetic colleague, a flicker of hope folded neatly in a small note, now seemed an echo from a world severely fractured. The walls that had offered minimal refuge were no shield from betrayal. Lenora's hands gripped tightly the edge of her desk, palms clammy, heart pounding with a turbulent cocktail of fear, anger, and the crushing solitude of silent alliance. A sudden vibration from her phone jolted her, a message from Harold, curt and cold. "Your involvement has been noted. Prepare for scrutiny." The threat hung in the air like heavy rain, a storm brewing not just outside but within these suffocating ceilings. The corporate badge on her lapel felt heavier, an emblem of both identity and precarious belonging, a double-edged sword in this game of power and prejudice. Lenora leaned back, closing her eyes, the fatigue etching deep lines across her expression. She recalled the laughter that had once echoed at her expense, the humiliating public prank, Harold's venomous jest that had turned her skills into spectacle. It was a raw, relentless pain, fueling her resolve but exacting a toll of whispered doubts. Her gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window once more. The droplets traced delicate paths, cascading and merging like the fragile lines of trust she clung to, constantly eroding beneath the tide of antagonism. She inhaled slowly, drawing strength from the quiet rhythm of her breath. What had begun as a pursuit of respect and inclusion had morphed into a solitary crusade, a battle to illuminate truth hidden beneath veils of racism and fear. The office lights dimmed momentarily in an electrical flicker, a brief abyss revealing the starkness of her isolation. Yet within that darkness blossomed a fierce clarity, unsettling yet invigorating. She realized the stakes were higher than she had imagined, not just for herself, but for the integrity of a workplace that ought to be built on merit and fairness. A knock on the glass startled her. Outside, the silhouette of a figure lingered briefly before vanishing into the night, an unspoken reminder that allies could be found in the least expected places. Gathering her resolve, Lenora's fingers danced back across the keyboard, the code revealing secrets no longer safe in shadow. Each line was a step deeper into confrontation, her defiance growing as the truth stirred to the surface like a tide rising to reclaim the shore. But then, the system locked down a final act of sabotage designed to silence. Error messages flooded the screen, red warnings flashing like alarms in the quiet night. Her heart clenched. The betrayal was no longer in whispers or glances but an open war. Yet beneath the despair was a spark, and with it, a silent determination ignited. "They want me to vanish," she whispered to the room, voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "But I will be the storm they never saw coming." The rain outside intensified, a furious symphony against the glass, as Lenora stared into the digital abyss with unflinching eyes, ready for the battle that would define her, a fight for respect, identity, and justice. The storm was no longer just outside. It was within, and it was about to break. The muted gray light of dawn seeped through the streaked windows of the corporate office, casting long, somber shadows across the sterile floors. Outside, the relentless rain pounded the glass with unforgiving rhythm, as if echoing the turmoil tightening around Lenora's chest, a storm both inside and out. She sat alone in the vacant office, the hum of the city contrasting sharply with the deafening silence enveloping her soul. Her corporate ID badge lay cold and heavy on the desk before her, once a symbol of belonging. It now felt like a scarlet letter branding her as an outsider. The vibrant colors of her blouse, which had so recently represented her spirited individuality and fierce hope, were muted beneath the dim light. Every thread seemed weighted down by the looming shadow of rejection and blame. The taste of betrayal lingered bitterly in her mouth. The discovery of the security breach, the relentless finger-pointing, the false accusations, each a sharp blow, each chipping away at the foundation of trust and identity she had fought so hard to build. Harold's contempt had metastasized into a cancerous silence among her colleagues, leaving her isolated within the very walls that once promised opportunity. Her hands trembled as they brushed against the smooth, cold surface of the keyboard, her mind haunted by the echo of hostile whispers, the smirks exchanged behind closed doors, and the crushing feeling of invisibility in a place where visibility meant control. The rain outside intensified, a torrential roar that drowned the occasional distant siren and the faint city murmurs. Droplets condensed on the windowpane, streaking downward in glistening rivulets, a visual symphony of dissipation and cleansing that felt cruelly distant from the stagnation tightening its grip on her spirit. Lenora's breath caught as she stared into her reflection in the glass, two faces superimposed, the woman she once was, full of vibrant dreams and fierce resolve, and the woman carved from harsh reality, bruised, fatigued, and teetering on the edge of surrender. The mirror fractured by raindrops was a metaphor for her fractured self, the once sharp image now blurred and incomplete. There was no room for doubt or voice in this cold morning chamber. Only the oppressive knowledge of what had been lost: pride, respect, a sense of place and self. The office chair beneath her creaked softly, a lonely sound milling in the vast emptiness. A text vibrated softly in her purse, a quiet alarm among the tumult. She hesitated, fingers hovering, then withdrew. Some battles felt too vast for a single step, too dangerous for vulnerability. A whisper slipped from her lips, raw and fragile, for no one to hear. Where do I go when the place I called home turns against me? The silence pressed on, thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like the rain-laden night embracing the indifferent city. And in that hollow moment, beneath the blackened sky and the desolate light, Lenora felt the fragile threads of her world unraveling faster than she could grasp, the story she thought she controlled slipping into shadow. The city's incessant rainfall blurred the unforgiving skyline outside Lenora's small apartment window, droplets racing each other in tangled rivulets that mirrored the chaos within her. The dim room was swallowed by shadows, the faint glow of a single overhead bulb casting stark, angular shapes that fractured the space into silent shards. She sat motionless on a worn leather chair, her silhouette fragile against the cold emptiness. Each breath she drew felt heavy, weighed down by the ache of loss and isolation. The office, once a place of possibility, had become a prison of silence and suspicion. Her name, once whispered with quiet respect by the few who saw her worth, was now a whispered curse, a scarlet mark of betrayal. The corporate ID badge, typically clipped proudly to her blouse, lay forgotten on the bedside table, a cold, lifeless emblem that once represented her identity but now only reminded her of belonging denied. The rain outside pounded relentlessly, like a dirge for dreams deferred. Her fingers trembled as she traced the edges of her tablet's cracked screen, the digital gateway through which she had once wielded power and passion, now a ghostly specter of failure. The code, the quick logic, the solutions all drowned beneath accusations and sabotage orchestrated by those determined to see her broken. Silence stretched interminable and oppressive, pierced only by the distant mutter of thunder rolling over the sleeping city. The walls themselves seemed to close in, the claustrophobic stillness pressing into every pore, a chilling assault on spirit and will. Lenora's eyes flickered to a small, withered rose pressed beneath a stack of unopened mail, the same rose she had carried as a symbol of hope, now shriveled and fragile, petals curling like the last remnants of her resolve. The flower's faded bloom mirrored the hollowing fire inside, a whispered memory of courage slipping away. A soft sigh, barely audible, escaped her lips. Is this the end? No answer came. Only the relentless rhythm of rain, the echo of her own heartbeat faint and faltering against the silence. Her gaze fell once more to her reflection in the rain-speckled window, a fractured image caught between storm and calm, light and shade. The woman who stared back was worn, diminished, yet within her eyes lingered a glimpse, a latent spark too stubborn to be extinguished. Tears traced silent tracks down her cheek, indistinguishable from the drips on glass, dissolving into the river of desolation. The room grew still, as if holding its breath with her, enveloping Lenora in a cocoon of darkness and solitude, a crucible where despair had woven its deepest threads. And in that suspended breath, the delicate balance tipped, plunging her into the abyss, a place where courage seemed but a distant echo and the future was a void as endless and cold as the night. Yet still, faint and flickering, beneath the weight of collapse, a solitary ember awaited wind, waiting to ignite anew. The muted glow of dawn seeped through the heavy, rain-streaked windows of the small apartment. Lenora sat on the edge of a worn chair, the fabric soft and familiar beneath her fingers but unable to soothe the turmoil within. Outside, the city stirred life, awakening despite the lingering storm clouds, but here, inside, the world seemed to hold its breath in quiet suspension. The office ID badge lay beside her on the chipped wooden table, its acrylic surface catching faint shards of early morning light. To others, it was a symbol of identity and acceptance. To Lenora, it was a fragile talisman, a silent witness to battles fought and scars borne. She traced its edge absently, the cold plastic grounding her amongst the shadows. Her thoughts drifted to the security breach, the black hole of deceit and sabotage she had uncovered, a secret weapon that had quickly become a weapon against her. The sting of betrayal by trusted colleagues echoed painfully. The accusations, the isolation, the looming threat of suspension, it had all boiled down to a moment of devastating loss. A soft rustling drew her attention. A slip of paper, worn and creased, lay half-visible pushed beneath the table leg. With tentative fingers, she pulled it free, a note left by an unknown hand. The ink was faint, but the words burned bright within her fatigued heart. Strength is born in the shadows. Your light has not dimmed. Her breath caught, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, mingling with the faint traces of rain that had escaped the window's seal. The note was a fragile beacon, a whisper of hope and kinship amidst suffocating solitude. Lenora closed her eyes, inhaling deeply the scent of damp concrete mingled with lingering coffee and city rain. The memory of supportive glances, small acts of kindness buried beneath the office's harsh veneer, surfaced faint but persistent. Marcus from IT, who had offered quiet encouragement. The faint nods of colleagues beginning to see her true worth beyond the scorn. The rain outside softened to a gentle drizzle, the windows blurring the urban landscape into a watercolor of muted blues and grays, much like her own blurred sense of self, fragmented, but not shattered. A distant siren wove through the awakening streets, its melancholic wail a soundtrack to her fragile awakening. Lenora's fingers curled tightly around the note. The small, unexpected connection ignited a flicker deep within her chest. It was a spark, a seed of courage in the fertile soil of despair. The electronic hum of her phone startled the quiet. A message from an unknown number, just a few words. Don't let them define you. She stared at the screen, the weight of the day pressing down, yet tempered by the delicate flame of resilience. Her lips parted, just enough to whisper into the tranquil air, not yet. The morning light spilled further into the room, soft and warm, a subtle herald of the long journey still ahead. With deliberate grace, Lenora rose, the chair's creak a quiet proclamation of endurance. The rain outside ceased, the sky lightening, promising reprieve and rebirth. And within the silence that embraced her, she found the first faint notes of a new resolve, the whispered cadence of hope gently coaxing the dawn. The first delicate rays of morning light crept cautiously through the towering windows of the office, scattering shadows that had once clung like chains around Lenora's spirit. The rain, which had relentlessly battered the city through the night, softened to a gentle drizzle, its steady rhythm a quiet promise of cleansing and renewal. Outside, The blurred shapes of skyscrapers shimmered in the wet streets, reflections dancing like fragile embers, symbols of hope amidst the gray. Lenora sat by her desk, the sterile blue glow of her laptop softened by the tender embrace of dawn. Her fingers traced the edges of her corporate ID badge, the plastic rectangle now a talisman of resilience rather than mere identity. The badge a symbol of belonging in a world that had repeatedly sought to alienate her caught the sunlight and shimmered faintly, a beacon among the cold steel and glass. The air in the room was still, pregnant with possibility. The sterile tension of countless meetings, whispered slights, and stolen glances folded gently upon itself, making room for a fragile but unyielding surge of strength within her. Lenora's eyes, once clouded with doubt and fatigue, now sparkled with a nascent clarity, a fierce light tempered by the scars of yesterday's battles. Near her, a small pot of green fern basked quietly in the sunlight, leaves unfurling like silent odes to growth. It was a living counterpart to her own journey, resilience thriving despite shadow and neglect. Her breaths deepened, steadying with the rhythm of rains often streets and the distant hum of a city awakening to a new day. She reached for the familiar warmth of her coffee mug, fingers curling tightly around ITAN anchor in the turbulent sea of corporate strife. Memories of the public humiliation, Harold's mocking derision, the cruel laughter that had punctured her confidence surfaced briefly, a stab she met now with a tempered resolve rather than shattered silence. The sting remained, a scar etched deep, but it no longer defined her. "This is not the end," she whispered to the quiet room, voice low but resolute, the words an unshakable promise to herself as much as a declaration to the invisible adversaries. Outside, the clouds shifted, lifting slowly to reveal patches of unblemished blue. The city's heartbeat quickened, a symphony of honking cabs, distant sirens, and footsteps on pavement, mingling into an anthem of relentless drive and unspoken possibility. A cascade of email notifications broke her reverie. Among them, a message flagged with a simple subject, potential. Her eyes flickered with cautious hope as she opened it. The sender was a colleague whose support was unexpected but sincere, words of encouragement and acknowledgement woven through the text. It was a small lifeline hurled across the gulf of isolation, a reminder that unseen allies existed in this labyrinth of glass and steel. Lenora's smile was brief but genuine, a crack in the armor revealing the fierce determination underneath. She rose, freshly steeled by the fragile dawn, the first agent of her transformation. The quiet office, once a chamber of shadows and doubts, now held a hint of warmth and possibility, its stark surfaces softened by the light of a new day and a new self. Her fingers brushed the keyboard with renewed purpose, the familiar hum of the machine weaving a soundtrack of quiet rebirth. The journey was far from over. Battles awaited, and the looming presence of Harold still haunted the corners. But in the silent symphony of dawn, Lenora glimpsed a truth that would carry her forward. Change was possible, fragile yet unstoppable. And in that first golden breath of morning, the cage of despair cracked, letting in the light, slender, fierce, beautiful. The story surged onward, no longer paused by defeat but propelled by the delicate, tempestuous force of awakening. The conference room was alive with tension, sharp and electric as Lenora stood at the center of growing attention. The window behind her stretched from floor to ceiling, the morning light slicing the room into stark contrasts, cold blues of the cityscape below blending with the golden hues flooding the edges. The rain had ceased, leaving behind glass smeared with droplets like tears and hope intertwined. At last, the subdued mutters of skepticism and covert glances turned toward focused silence. Across the room, Harold's gaze burned with an uncomfortable mix of defiance and dread. He stood, rigid, a man accustomed to command now unmoored by the very truths Lenora had unearthed. Her hands, steady despite the pounding of her heart, held documents and digital evidence systematically compiled, the hidden email threads exposing whispered slights and conspired undermining, records revealing the breaches orchestrated under Harold's watch and attempts to implicate her falsely. Lenora's voice was low, precise, cutting through the thick air with a clarity born of fearless conviction. The integrity of this company cannot be preserved by hiding behind discrimination and sabotage. The truth is here. It's time to confront it, together. A flicker of hesitation moved through the crowd, the rising swell of awareness tempered by lingering fear. A few nodded subtly, their eyes shining with the spark of courage ignited by Lenora's unwavering stance. Harold's voice broke the stillness, sharp and trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You're overstepping, Lenora. This company isn't some playground for your idealism." She met his gaze squarely, her reply steady as steel. "Overstepping? I'm claiming what's rightfully mine and what belongs to every person here. Truth, respect, dignity." The temperature shifted. The long-held shadows of prejudice and power began to dissipate in the piercing light of exposure. Colleagues murmur agreements, some hesitant but gathering force, a wave forming beneath Lenora's feet that carried her forward. The corporate ID badge, once a token of mere survival, now gleamed brightly against her Blosia symbol, reclaimed, reforged into a banner of empowerment. Outside, through the rain-dappled glass, shafts of sunlight broke fully through lingering clouds, scattering prismatic hues across concrete and steel, painting a mural of change. Lenora's chest swelled with a profound revelation, a fusion of liberation and responsibility that crystallized in the moment. She was no longer a silent target nor a shadow in the background, but a beacon rising, fierce and unyielding. The room erupted into focused energy as the first steps toward justice began, fragile yet undeniable. New alliances took shape. Tentative conversations sparked seeds of reform. As Lenora collected her documents, a gentle chime sounded her phone, a soft reminder that the clock was turning and battle still lay ahead. Her eyes softened with a quiet smile, the light catching the vibrant hues of her blouse and the glistening ID badge, a vivid contrast against the subdued palette of the room. With the storm beyond broken and a new dawn at hand, Lenora felt the rush of first victory, the surge of hope rippling through the hardest conflicts. For the first time, the weight of the past lifted just enough to glimpse the horizon, a fragile but fierce promise of change, justice, and belonging. And in that moment of awakening, the future unfolded before her, vast and radiant. The boardroom was transformed. The cold, clinical blues of the office walls now caught the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight filtering through massive windows, casting long, golden shafts of light across the polished conference table. Dust motes drifted lazily in the amber beams, as if the very air itself was infused with newfound possibility and justice realized. Lenora stood at the head of the table, no longer the silent target of scorn but a commanding figure, poised with fierce dignity and calm purpose. Her natural curls framed a face no longer shadowed by doubt but alight with a powerful, radiant glow. The colorful blouse she wore, a vibrant contrast to the muted tones of corporate monotony, seemed almost aflame, a metaphor for the fire within her heart and spirit, undimmed and fiercely alive. The corporate ID badge that once represented a fragile claim to identity was now worn proudly, a symbol reclaimed and reforged. Eyes that had once avoided her now found themselves drawn inexorably to her presence. Colleagues, some sheepish, some resigned, others quietly admiring, listened closely as she spoke. Words flowed not with bitterness or anger but with unshakable conviction, tempered by grace. This company, our community, thrives not because of silence or shadowed cruelty, but because every voice is heard, every talent nurtured. Her voice was clear, resonant, a bell ringing through the quiet halls of injustice. Harold, once a looming figure of intimidation and oppression, sat across the room, visibly diminished. His slippery smiles evaporated beneath Lenora's relentless clarity and the damning evidence she wielded, a cache of emails, logs, and recordings that exposed the corrosive undercurrent of his prejudices and manipulations. His smug facade cracked with every thread unraveled, the poisonous vines he had tended retreating before the light. As she laid down the final piece of evidence, a symbolic severing blow, Lenora's gaze met his with unflinching strength. Your reign of fear is ended. The future belongs to those who uplift and empower, not those who belittle and divide. A hush fell over the room, the gravity of justice descending like a bomb on wounds that had festered unchecked. Around her, the flickering shadows receded, replaced by the dawn of accountability and change. The rain, once a steady drumming against the windows, slowed to a gentle patter, the storm passing over, leaving behind a cleansed, vivid world. The rose on Lenora's desk pressed from the note that first seeded her resolve caught the sunlight, its crimson petals glowing with the promise of renewal and hope. It was a full circle, from fragility to formidable strength, from dismissal to rightful recognition. Harold was quietly escorted from the room, the footsteps echoing a closing chapter, a final reckoning. Lenora's colleagues exchanged respectful nods, the atmosphere shifting from cold distance to tentative warmth. She turned to the window, the cityscape sprawling vast and alive beneath a sky breaking free from clouds, spangled with the first glimmers of evening stars. In that expansive horizon, she glimpsed a future forged not just by battles won but by the unshakable power of self-belief and courage. Her voice, soft yet resolute, broke the silence. This is just the beginning. The room breathed with the weight of new beginnings, and Lenora stood poised, dunbowed, transformed, and ready to lead the way into a brighter dawn. The sun was slowly dipping below the skyscrapers of the city, casting a warm amber glow that softened the relentless steel and glass of the corporate skyline. Inside the bustling office, silent and poised, Lenora moved with a newfound calmness, each step deliberate, each gesture embodying a quiet strength that radiated from within. Her colorful blouse shimmered slightly in the waning light, a subtle reminder of the vibrant spirit that had endured the storm. She paused at her desk, the weight of the past lifting just enough to breathe freely, her eyes lingering on the modest badge clipped to her Kalara, symbol of her identity reclaimed and transformed. It shone beneath the gentle glow, a testament to the resilience and purpose she now carried forward. The office had changed. The hushed whispers and cautious glances had given way to a respectful silence, a collective recognition of her journey. Around her, colleagues exchanged hesitant nods and renewed smiles, an unspoken acknowledgement of the walls broken and victories won. The atmosphere, once frayed with hostility and prejudice, now hummed with a gentle harmony and affirmation of progress, however fragile. In that quiet moment, Lenora reached for her mug, feeling the warmth seep into her fingers, a small comfort amidst the quiet reflection that settled deep within. She closed her eyes briefly, allowing herself a moment of serenity and acknowledgement of her growth. Her journey had been arduous, marked by humiliation, loss, and fierce determination, but now she stood grounded in the knowledge that real change was possible. A soft breeze wafted through the open window, carrying the scents of the city, fresh rain on asphalt, blooming flowers from nearby parks, the promise of renewal in the air. The distant hum of traffic blended into a lullaby of hope, signaling that her chapter was evolving but far from ending. Her gaze drifted toward the city's horizon, where the city's lights twinkled like stars, each a beacon of future possibilities. The storm outside had subsided, leaving behind a calm that mirrored the peace blossoming within her. She finally understood that her strength wasn't just about her individual victory, it was a seed for others to see and nurture their own. A gentle smile touched her lips as she closed the laptop, her posture relaxed but dignified. The scars of yesterday no longer defined her, replaced by a quiet acceptance, a recognition that she had forged her own path through resilience. The window framed the glowing sky, a canvas for hope and renewal, a visual testament to the emotional rebirth unfolding within. In that luminous dusk, Lenora felt the gentle lull of a new beginning, soft, steady, and full of promise. The journey ahead was still unfolding, but she was ready to embrace it, illuminated by the quiet glow of her own resilience. The office was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon light, poreless and gentle as if the tired shadows of the past had finally receded, leaving only the warmth of hope. Lenora stood by the expansive window overlooking the city, her reflection shimmering in the glass, a vibrant mosaic of resilience and grace. Her figure was calm now, a silent testament to the turbulent journey that had carved out her strength. Her hands, once trembling with doubt and fear, rested loosely at her sides, fingers softly curled as they subtly clutched the nameplate on her desk. Lenora, Chief Operations Officer. The words beneath her name shone like a quiet declaration. She belonged. Across the room, colleagues moved with a quiet reverence, their eyes respectful, some apologetic, others simply awestruck by her transformation. The polished black and chrome of the office seemed to reflect the rebirth, an environment infused with a new, unspoken understanding. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling the scent of fresh rain that still lingered on the windowsill. The storm had passed. The clouds had parted, revealing a clear sky streaked with pink and gold, a mirror to her internal awakening, a dawn where darkness had dissolved into light. A gentle smile touched her lips as she recalled the moments of the long road. The humiliation, the doubt, the unwavering resolve to change the narrative, these were now woven into her very presence. Her journey had begun with a simple act of standing tall amid chaos, and had culminated into a statement of unshakable integrity. The faint hum of the city below merged with her breathing, steady and assured. She reflected on her growth, how each trial had polished her resolve, their shadows becoming the very foundation of her luminous future. Her fingertips brushed the edge of a photograph on her desk, an image of her younger self, eyes bright with unclaimed dreams. She gazed at it quietly, a silent acknowledgement of the relentless courage that had carried her through the storm. The room behind her was quiet, a sanctuary renewed. The past had taught her that forgiveness begins within, that healing is born from understanding and acceptance both for herself and those who had once dismissed her. With a final glance at the bright horizon beyond, Lenora stepped away from the window, dignified, whole, and free. Her heart beat a gentle drum of gratitude and resolve. She was no longer a symbol of struggle, but a herald of change, an embodiment of the resilience that could transform injustice into empowerment. The city shimmered in the amber sunset, a testament to her journey, an endless horizon inviting her into an unfolding story of hope and renewal. And as the warm glow enveloped her, she walked forward, embracing a peace that settled deep within, the silent promise of a future she had fought fiercely to claim, beautiful, boundless, and truly her own. The city outside basked in a quiet, golden dusk, its skyline a silhouette against a sky painted with strokes of lavender and amber. Inside, Lenora stood at the edge of the panoramic window, a silent witness to the tranquil transformation she had helped catalyze. Her silhouette was illuminated by the warm glow of the setting sun, casting a soft halo around her, the culmination of relentless resolve and quiet dignity. Her gaze lingered on the bustling street below, where life pulsed with a renewed vibrancy. People moved forward with purpose, unburdened by prejudice, their steps synchronized with her own newfound confidence. The cool glass against her fingertips was a mirror reflecting her journey from shadows to light, from silence to voice. She took a slow breath, filling her lungs with the crisp air of possibility. The distant hum of the city was now a symphony of resilience and hope, a lullaby for those still fighting, now emboldened by her quiet triumph. Her uniform, a gentle trace of her former self, was replaced by an elegant, simple dress that symbolized her rebirth, each detail whispering the story of her resilience woven into the fabric. As she turned, her eyes reached out toward the horizon, where the first stars began to glisten, timid yet persistent in the twilight. Her face softened into a smiley and unspoken embracing of her journey, her pain, her victory. The shadows of yesterday remained behind her, but they no longer defined her, they only marked the depth from which she had risen. The heavy curtains fluttered gently in the evening breeze, a symbol of barriers lifted, of boundaries dissolved. The room was filled with a serene silence, the kind that embraces and whispers of peace, an eternal moment where time itself seemed to bow in reverence. Light and shadow danced softly across the walls, echoing the delicate balance between struggle and serenity, a poetic reflection of her soul's voyage. The city's heartbeat continued beneath her, steady and unwavering, promising that her story was now an integral part of its resilient symphony. A single flower, pressed and preserved, sat on a nearby tablethe rose of her early hopes, now blossoming anew in the garden of her spirit. It was a final emblem of transformation, a testament that beauty and strength can bloom even from the harshest trials. Lenora pressed her hand lightly against the glass, her silhouette merging with the vast, luminous world beyond. Her posture was calm, poised on the edge of a new chapter, dignified and tranquil. And in that quiet, cinematic moment, the city sleeping beneath a sky softly ablaze with twilight, she stayed centered, complete, and utterly at peace. What hidden skills could unveil new heroes in your life? Share your thoughts below.